Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at. I am, I think, successfully streaming on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube right now. So I hope you are having a fabulous Wednesday so far. And as I mentioned before, I wanted to go live today. I want to talk a little bit about my journey into bringing human design into the work that I do and understanding some things more about myself. And so, just to give you a little backstory, I will tell you that growing up, it was actually, I found myself struggling a lot, struggling with how I showed up, struggling with what what was the right direction. I felt like oftentimes I was being put into a box, and I think many of us felt that way, where we feel like we didn't quite fit. Right, there were things that I oftentimes got made fun of, or I got even reprimanded for the ways that I showed up energetically, the ways that I showed up from a standpoint of how I worked, what I did, the creativity, the way my brain thought. And so it's interesting because I always struggled with this idea of feeling like I just didn't fit, feeling like I didn't fit in this box, feeling like I didn't fit in a space where I knew which way was up sometimes. And so lots of questions. And I've been on this journey probably, God, I probably started this journey just in terms of trying to figure out who I am. I don't know, maybe fifth, sixth grade, I started writing poetry. I started trying to get and express some of my thoughts out. I started to read different books. I started to lean into different teachers. And I just always had this like insatiable curiosity. And I think many of you can probably relate with that, where there's just this space of, why and how things work. Right. And so I will tell you, I used to drive my mom crazy because I was one of those people that always asked why is this the way it is? Why does this work the way it does? Why do we do this? Why do I have to go to bed at this time? Like all of the reasons we had these rules and these processes and these kind of systems around things. Usually my creativity and my curiosity would get kind of fired and say, well, why is that so? Why do we believe that? And some of that I will attribute to some of the open spaces in my energetic blueprint. And I'll talk about that in just a minute, because I do want to talk about some fundamental things that I've learned through this journey over what I'm almost 50 years old at this point. And so it's this space of understanding, first of all, we're not here to be like everybody else. And I think about the way that we're programmed, the way that we're conditioned in our culture. It's all around this space of fitting into a box, right? We have so many people that talk about, I'm a square peg trying to be fit in a round hole, right? And everything we do, every system we have, every process we have, everything that we have in our culture right now is in this space of everybody needs to look the same. We all fit in this box. This is how it's supposed to be. And for many of us, that doesn't feel like the place where we're congruent, the place that feels aligned. And so it leaves us wondering, what's wrong with me? I'm not deserving. I'm not worth it. How come I can't do things like someone else? And so, like I said, I've been on this quest for a really long time. I think I've always had that curiosity. I've been sort of one of those people that is, audacious. And I just used to like jump in and go to things. Hey, Julie, it's great to see you. And so it's this space of recognizing that there was always this question, why? And not why, like my compelling why, but why are things the way they are? And so going through this journey, one of the things that actually rocked my world, and I can remember I had a conversation, I was living in Cleveland at the time, and it was my first job out of college. And I had gone, and it was somewhat of a very challenging experience for me. And I'll share more of that story later, but I really felt isolated. I really felt alone. I really felt like I didn't know my bearings. And I was in my first real corporate job where it wasn't healthy. It was extremely toxic. I was very isolated. I had no friends. It was this very unhealthy community, a lot of racism, a lot of energy that just wasn't real connected, and there wasn't a lot of room for diversity. I was the only woman with a degree working in my office. It was just this really challenging period. And I remember at the time, some of the walk on my own spiritual path opened up, and I started to read the Bible. I was like, okay, I want to understand some things on a deeper level. And I remember calling my mom. I had like pages and pages and pages of notes after going through and reading the Bible one time. And it was really interesting because I had all these questions, right? And I was like, why this? Why this? How come this? This seems to be a contradiction. And like, I can remember my mom going, okay, I'm not the person to have that conversation with you. Go take a religion class, go take a whatever. And yet I wasn't getting the answers that I was looking for. And so always been seeking that why or how. How does this work? Why do we think this way? Why am I supposed to fit in this box? How am I wired? Who am I? Like just questions just kept coming up. And the more I dug into things, the more questions came to the surface. And so for some of you, I'm guessing you've probably been in that space too, where you're like, holy shit, the more I go down a rabbit hole, the more rabbit holes open up and the more I find myself asking even more questions. Like there's layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And I remember one of the first things that sort of gave me, it's hard to say answers, but it gave me the insight, or it gave me some things that dropped in differently. And it was when I picked up, I was working at Northwestern Mutual at the time. It was when I picked up the book. There was a group of us that were in this conversation. This was exactly, we're like, what is the meaning of life kind of question, right? It's this esoteric question that we walk around with sometimes. What's the meaning of life? What's my purpose? Who am I supposed to be? And we forget oftentimes that we are our purpose, right? The meaning of life is to serve. The meaning of life is to be in your gifts and to activate that life. Well, it's taken me a while to get there, right? And so there was one resource that we tripped upon, and we created kind of this study group to lean into, and it was Conversations with God. Really, really interesting read and powerful book. And it was the first time some of the things that didn't make sense for me started to like connect. And hey, Jamie, great to see you. And so it's that space of really recognizing like I got some of the answers, that the questions that just kept percolating, the questions that just kept leaning in, the questions that were taking me out. It gave me a space to open up a wider lens to look at my perspective from kind of all angles. And one of those things that's open in my chart, actually, that's how I'm wired. I like to look at things from different perspectives. I like to see the rabbit holes. I like to go down that path. So doing that work, I kept leaning into it, right? And so fast forward to about 5 years ago, and I will tell you, when I stepped away from corporate to step into the space, and it's been a decade now that I stepped away from 20 years of corporate. I stepped into a space that has allowed me to serve people in a greater capacity, lean in. I really felt compelled to do a deeper level of leadership work. And if you followed anything that I've done, you see that is the crux of everything I do. It's all around growing the next generation of leaders. It's all around changing the definition of leadership and putting us in a space where we learn how to lead ourselves first, to know that that's the only way we can lead from love with love. And we are here. We all have the capacity to lead from where we're at, and leadership is a choice, right? So that being said, if you would have told me a decade ago that I would be having this conversation with you today, I would have told you were effing crazy. I would have told you that you were like completely nuts, because coming from an engineering background, I'm a mechanical engineer by degree, which shocks people sometimes because I'm not a linear thinker. And I struggled in my engineering classes, except for classes like quantum physics, classes like differential equations, anything that was an abstract way to look at engineering, I excelled at. The things that were very linear, say statics, dynamics, regular physics, I struggled with. And I thought there was something wrong with me. What I didn't realize is it's because my brain is not wired. My DNA, my energy is not wired to think in a linear capacity. Now, again, 10 years ago, if you would have told me that I'd be having this conversation around energy and how that works in terms of your wiring, and I would have even talked about or even been curious about epigenetics and your DNA coding and like what you came into this world with, I'd have told you were crazy. I would have told you it was all woo-woo. I would have told you I was very much in that space and that programming, that I didn't see the connection of some of the esoteric, some of the energetic language, the spiritual language, looking at things from a more holographic, holistic standpoint. I only saw things in the way I was taught in my academics, in schooling. I mean, I did a mechanical engineering degree. I even started a master's in environmental engineering, and it took me out when I realized I actually was going to have to do the work at a level of getting an undergrad in organic chemistry and microbiology. And I was like, I'm out. I could feel the pressure building, and again, thought something was wrong, and eventually went and finished with my MBA. And there was also this belief that was the way that I got to show I was worth the value that I thought I brought into the world, that I needed all these credentials. I mean, I did Six Sigma black belt. I have letters and things behind my names that go on for days, because I thought I needed all that validation. It was all of this external projection that said something isn't right with me. I'm not fitting into the system. I'm not fitting into the box. And like I said, when I read Conversations with God, that was the first real opening for me to be able to think, to be able to have a space where I felt I could give myself permission for the way that I was thinking. It was a different perspective and way to look at my relationship with God, or universe, source, Tao, Penelope, whatever you want to call it. And it was a different way for me to see my own spiritual journey. And so it sort of opened up this access for me that, like I said, stepping into some of these other places, I was like, that's just woo-woo. And I was that's woo-woo, I don't want anything to do with it person. I mean, I had a hard stop on that. Okay, 5 years ago, I was going through a shit show in my business and personally. There was just a lot going on. I mentioned this in another video, but I had taken on a client that really had gutted me from the inside out on more ways than one and was never the right fit. In fact, signing the contract with her was a very big one-on-one client. I was actually nauseous. I had a very clear no show up in my body, and I pushed through it anyway. And some of you are going to relate to this. When we say yes to those things that are very clearly showing up intuitively and from a guttural, visceral way, that's a hard no. And when we step into that space, it will turn us inside out. And so it did. And I was really going through a challenging period where I just didn't know if I wanted to continue to do this. I actually had significant thoughts about going back to corporate, where it felt safe, although not. And I just wasn't sure I could stay in this space to continue doing the work that was calling through me, because it was all the work that I was doing was taking me out. Well, comes to find out, there was a tremendous amount of codependent threads through that. So anyway, I had a client, I was running a couple masterminds at the time, and I had really awesome masterminds in addition. So I had some really awesome, juicy things going on in my business. And then I had some things that were creating just this energy and creating this space that was taking me out. She had asked me, this was May of 2018. She brought to my attention, and she had said in one of our masterminds, she's like, have you ever heard of human design? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I've seen some things on it. It's some energetic blueprint, blah, 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 whatever. It's not really for me. And she being the manifestor that she is, and I'll explain that in just a minute. She being the manifestor that she was, she kept kind of like informing and sharing and like casting this like vision around what she had just experienced in having her chart analyzed, working with someone who could really show her some of the things inside of what her energetic blueprint was telling her, what it really meant. And so my curiosity, that insatiable curiosity kicked in. Like there was this fire that got lit. And you know that. And by the way, if any of you are that generator type, whether manifesting or generator, you know when that fire kind of gets lit, you know your yes as well, or maybe you have an opportunity to relearn your lessons, right? Because the whole space of this isn't even as much about learning things. It's about unlearning and finding your way back to who you've always been. And so this is the part that started to fascinate me, is she started to talk about this, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So my instinct when I'm curious, and again, it's somewhat of the engineer in me, but it's also just the person that, you know, as a kid, anytime I asked why, I oftentimes got that punishing, go look at an encyclopedia. Yes, I'm that old that we didn't have Google. We didn't have that shit. So I had to go look something up. And so my encyclopedias were like my godsend, because it was the way that I could dig in and find information about something, right? And so I remember going on this quest, and I'm going to call it a quest, because it was one of those that I was like, all right, I'm curious. And so I went out and ran my chart, and I'm going to give you a way. There's so many ways you can run your chart, and there's just even the basics. And this is what I want to share with you today, tomorrow, and Friday, is just a basic understanding of what's available to you for you to draw your own conclusions and insights. Because I will tell you, and I'll get there in a minute, what I believe human design is and what it's not. And I'm gonna share my experience through my lens of how I've learned and how I've brought it into my life and how I've brought it into the work that I do now with clients. Because I do feel like, just like your spiritual walk, I feel like your experience, contemplation, and what you are pulling from your own energetic blueprint is extremely personal. So there's things that I can help offer as insights as to how you might navigate through that curiosity to start with, And then I'm going to say you also need to give yourself permission to allow it to move in whatever direction it's going to move. Like, you get to decide for yourself. This isn't something that I can teach you as much as I can help guide you and lead you down some ways to open up access for insight, contemplation, and your own understanding. So I'm gonna have this conversation specifically from my lens of what I've experienced, my lens of how it's impacted me, and the work that I now do with my clients to bring this to the forefront. I create these I have these strategic frameworks that are proprietary. I have built them. I work with my clients, and now I overlay this energetic blueprint. You're this holographic way to look at your own energetic coding and DNA. And we bring in human design and gene keys, and I'll talk about that a little bit more into the process. And it's like been so expansive as I've done that. And so it's prompted me to want to look at, how do I bring that into containers where more people can be in this conversation, more people can be in the contemplation of it, and can open up access to create a deeper awareness for their own understanding around who they are, how they're wired, and what they're here to serve. And so when I think about all of that struggling I went through, and some of that was I'm going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow, the stages of struggling I've gone through and where I'm arriving to as a 6/2 manifesting generator. My 6th line in particular has some very specific waves in it. What that looks like, and we're going to talk about the different lines in human design as well. So anyway, I started to go on this quest. To bring it back to what I was just saying. So I went on this quest because the question prompted this fire that started to like burn. And I was like, ooh, something about that. I can't shake it, which, as I've later learned, the emotional authority that I have when something keeps showing up after I've ridden I really like that. And I don't know. And I get to this place where I just can't let it go. And it feels like something I need to like jump into. There's a quest, there's a cycle, there's something that's showing up for me to sort of jump into and understand. And so I started to do my homework. I started to dig in, and I'll use the term that I like. I started to jump down a rabbit hole. Well, I will tell you, and one of my defaults, it's a gift and a curse. And I will tell you, I think it was Simon Sinek that said on a podcast that he and Brene Brown and Adam Grant did, that this idea of strengths and weaknesses is actual bullshit. It's all a matter of context. So it's something that I've taught a lot too, that every strength can also be your Achilles heel. It depends on how and when you're using it in the context of what's coming through. And so I say that because oftentimes we're like, oh, this is my strength. Depends on how you're using it. So to get away from this whole idea of strength and weaknesses and understand more from hey, Herbie, understanding a way for us to really understand the power of our own authority, our own ability to make decisions, the way we move energy, and recognizing our superpowers, recognizing the blocks, and recognizing perhaps the shadows that we are here to, move through and witness and heal from, which are our greatest opportunities to step into even our deeper gifts. That started to fascinate me. And so I went down a rabbit hole, which of course, the nature of how I'm wired and just my curiosity, one rabbit hole led to another rabbit hole, led to another rabbit hole, led to another rabbit hole. And it's really interesting. I get to a point where I actually got very overwhelmed. And it's funny because I've talked to a lot of people that if you've dabbled, because there's a lot of people right now talking about human design. And so I'm going to take a step back for a minute because I think I think this discussion is very important right now for a couple different reasons. The whole download that came through for Rahu around human design was really to set us up for the incoming energy that's coming February 2027. So we are shifting. We're shifting out of this energy that like globally we've been in since about 1615, which is called the cross of the planning. It's been this very governance, needing external validation, needing people around us to have a group think approval around things. There's been a lot of external, a lot of imbalanced, unhealthy masculine energy. And this is not male, female, just imbalanced masculine energy. It's part of the whole industrialized, we're all working to the same thing. We're all part of a system. It has been the energy that has been very prevalent universally since about 1650. We are moving into what is called the cross of the sleeping Phoenix, which is a more individualized energy that is bringing us back home to ourselves. It's bringing us back to a place where we are aligned as fuck, in a space that says, when I choose me, when I know how to lead me first, when I am taking care of my needs and desires, everyone around me is empowered and is getting the benefit of that new definition of selfishness that I'm bringing forward. So we are moving into this more feminine energy and this more individualized energy that says, I get to, by choosing me, I actually serve more, right? And so I love it because as I talk about leadership, this is so aligned with that. And when we look at the next 4 years, there is a shifting of some of our own skill development, our ability to come back and understand who we truly are and how we're wired. And newsflash, you're not wired like everybody else. You're not here to be a replication of everybody else that's already been doing things and we all have a lane, right? We all have a space where we bring a piece of the puzzle to the table. And so when we understand that, it is the recognition of what is my role in that whole like cosmic puzzle, right? So anyway, going down these rabbit holes, I will tell you, I got taken out a couple times because it's a lot. The rabbit holes are deep. And I will tell you, for many of you that maybe have dabbled in human design and some of the energetic coding, you can find it gets overwhelming very quickly. There is so much information. I mean, you can get down to a gnat's ass granular like level. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to give you some basic ways to start to understand what you can pull through for yourself. And again, it's a personal journey. It is a space around you taking care and time to contemplate at any point for where you're at. Because if you think about human design, and it's interesting because when I first started this journey, I sort of equated it to all the other assessments I did. And I'm the assessment queen, right? I do DISC assessment, Myers-Briggs, personality, color coding, strength finders, you name it. I facilitate this with the people that I work with. Assessment. I'm an assessment guru. I love assessments. Human design is not an assessment. Human design really is a blueprint. It is a map of the unique energetic coding that is hardwired into your cells and DNA. And some of it comes from generational stuff. Some of it is when you, like, if you've ever seen the movie Soul, when it's that space of when you decide how you're going to come to the world. If you're going to come to the world as a musician, then there needs to be a portal that can match the energy for the gifts that you're going to activate. And so we have a design date and a birthday, and it's all around. We have this declaration in the ethos of things that says, this is what your role is going to be as you incarnate in this life. And here's the energy that needs to be connected to you so that you can do that work. And so when you think about human design, it is a map. It is a blueprint that maps out that unique energetic coding. And what's interesting is, and if you've ever seen it, this is what they look like. And like I said, I'll drop a link in, and you can go out to either mybodygraph.com, you can go to jovian.com, or Genetic Matrix. They all, my favorite, truthfully, is Genetic Matrix. It's a much more complete graph. It gives you a whole lot more information over here. But this is what a human design chart looks like. That's a lot going on in that chart. This is mine, by the way. What I want you to realize is it's a map. And inside the map, there are other maps or paths or sequences that can give you insight around how you move energy, how you respond, how you lead, how you communicate, what you're here to overcome, where your gifts are located, what your superpowers are. And what I love about this is there's a duality that also shows up in this chart. And so if you don't know, what you see inside of here is a combination of Eastern philosophy, Eastern learning, Eastern teachings, and Western science, Western philosophy, Western teachings. And so you will see inside this chart, there's a couple things that show through. One, there's 64 gates that are total for you to have activated or not. Nobody has all 64, but 64 that represent the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. So the Chinese I Ching, right? Then we have the Kabbalah that if you turn this upside down, you can actually see it almost looks like the tree of life. That is where it brings in the influence from the Kabbalah. It also brings in Western and Eastern astrology astrology, numerology, and it brings in sort of the planet alignment. That's what you'll see here. On the black side is your conscious personality side. The red side is your unconscious design side. And so I'll get more into that a little bit later. Don't worry about that right now. There's two sides of who you are. So there's this duality, right? We have masculine, feminine energy. We have extroverted, introverted energy. We have things that like we show up in our personality, which is the energy that people receive from us about 70% of the time. And then we have energy that those that are closest to us actually see, and it's some of the gifts they're pulling through. All of that's mapped out in your chart. And so you can see that there's this huge map, and then there's these different maps that show up, whether we're talking about your incarnation cross, your activation sequence, your prosperity lines, whatever that might be, there's a story. There's a story that you get to get curious around. And when you choose to contemplate, you can bring forward things that are going to resonate and be meaningful for you at any point in time. And so one of the things that fascinates me about this is it's not a one and done. It is a very dynamic tool for you to lean into and continue to let the rabbit holes guide you a little bit. When you get overwhelmed, pull out and do whatever shows up and presents from the path that you went down, and kind of like see what that means in your life and explore it and get curious around it and create from it. And then when called, go down another path and open up another rabbit hole, right? So it's really fascinating. So I couldn't stop. Got a little overwhelmed, took myself out, started working with a spiritual teacher, cleared a whole lot of dense energy, especially around some of the codependent relationships that I'd created. And I found myself just before the pandemic, somewhere in around beginning 2019, that I felt myself called to come back and study it again. And I wanted to tease it out and see what it would look like to have the conversation, to bring it into the strategic work I was doing with leaders, my one-on-one clients, with leadership teams, with corporate. And it was fascinating. Because one of the things that happened was we started to have this in conjunction, the conversation when I would do DISC assessments, Myers-Briggs, then we would bring in human design. We would bring in this energetic blueprint. It was really interesting because I've done this for engineering firms. I've done this for Fortune 100 companies. I've done this for small and medium businesses here in Austin, where we started to look at, if we mapped out someone's chart and we mapped out their teams, let's look at the intersection points. Let's look at how people are wired. And it has changed the way my clients are leading their people. It has changed the way they're having conversations. It is changing the way they're developing their people. Because what we started to realize was, again, not everybody's wired the same. And so while your chart may look similar to someone's, how the story threads and where the map takes you is very different. And so we all have this unique blueprint that when we start to lean into various paths that the rabbit holes want to take us, there's a different story all the time. And so for the sake of keeping things a little simple, there is a strategy that if you're looking at this for the first time, and again, you can go out to geneticmatrix.com and run your own report. All you need to know is time of birth, date of birth, and location. Really important because it does create that alignment to what was going on energetically in the portal that you incarnated in this earth. What you do is there's a lot of information. My suggestion, and this is how it was taught to me when I got overwhelmed, I reached out to some teachers, and I've worked with some fantastic teachers who do this work at a much deeper level than I do. Starting with understanding the types, the 5 types. There's 5 types that show up in the human design space. So starting with the types, and then looking at their strategy and authority. So today, what I want to do is I want to start that conversation around types, strategy, authority. Tomorrow, we're going to look more at the individual lines of the profile, because that's the next piece that sort of tells the story around why you were here. So if you think about it for a minute, if you think about what each of these is telling you, when you look at, and I have some notes here because there's so much in this that I don't want to miss something for you. When you look at the 5 energy types, this is really the way of creating and making decisions. This is this is the role, so to speak. So if you, again, going back to the movie Soul, the Pixar movie, and he's like, Jamie Foxx wanted to be the musician, right? The jazz musician. Your type is like, I want to come into the world as a jazz musician. So it's the role you're here to play. Then when you look at the profiles, your profiles are who you think you are how people receive you. So it's the energy of your personality and it's the energy of your innate design. So it's who you think you are and how you identify yourself inside your work. So it's that sense of, what am I here to do? What's my purpose? And there's a way to map out what comes through in your profiling, especially when you look at your incarnation cross, that's really designed to say, then what is my purpose? What am I here to do? What's the why behind the role that I'm having? And it's really your personality, your character that you bring to the table, right? And so it's the space of what and how do others perceive your energy. And again, there's this duality in it. There's the conscious line and the unconscious line. And like I said, we're going to get into that tomorrow. The third piece, now there's a whole lot more. There's gates and channels and the crosses and the arrows and all your cognition. And there's a lot. Again, I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. The third piece is around your centers. You have, and what happens is, again, if you remember, I was talking about, Eastern and Western, it's bringing those two pieces together. You got the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, you've got the Kabbalah. You look at the chart and you're like, wow, that kind of looks like the chakra system. It takes the 7 chakra system and expands it into 9. And so the 9 chakras, or the 9 centers, are the spaces of how and where we move energy. We either have a consistent way we move that, which is defined, or we have an inconsistent and oftentimes we are very influenced by things external to us. And so we feel the projections of others, we amplify that. And it's a lot of where our conditioning comes from, the open spaces. So that'll be day 3 that I'm going to talk about the centers, because the centers are then the hubs that receive and transform energy. So it's how energy moves through your unique system. Whether or not you have a consistent way of how you think and process things, which I do not. I have an open center, right? So again, I'm going to share some of that. So for today, let me talk about the 5 types real quick. There are 5 types that when you look at your chart, and you'll usually see that it's over here on this side so you can see what it is. The first type is what's known as a manifester. Now, the manifester, when you look at that role, is probably about, 8-9% of the population. So it's a really small subset of who is here. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what a manifester is. But a manifester is one of the types. And a manifester's role is really, their strategy is to inform and initiate. They are the idea generators. They are the visionaries. They are the leaders who the idea drops in and they need to put it into action. They also have a natural repelling and bold aura about them. So oftentimes it can feel very, it can feel like a lot of energy blasted at you. And it can feel like sometimes very harsh. It can be this very repelling energy. One of the manifestors' opportunities is finding the right environments and people that are their environments and people where they can build these like energetic relationships with, so that when they choose to initiate, when they choose to put that work out, they actually have people that receive that and are able to then take that work and move it into action. Because oftentimes manifestors are here to initiate those that do a lot more of the work. It's not to say manifestors don't do work. And I also want you to realize this is not to pigeonhole anybody. When I offer the dimensions I'm going to offer today, tomorrow, and Friday, please know that these are just generalizations around what types of nuances show up in this energy. And the story only happens when you connect all of the dots together. So someone may say, I'm a manifestor and I don't feel like that. Great, because you probably have other things in your chart that are showing up that are driving behaviors or energy or the ways that you respond to things very differently. And so it's a very holistic, and it is a intuitive sort of dynamic. It is something that is not a linear, hey, now you're pigeonholed and you're put in a box. And it's one of the things I think some people are out there as they're communicating. It feels very much like this is the box you're in as a manifestor. If your profile looks like this, and I want you to think more expansively than that. I want you to think about what resonates, what are the nuances, and how might that apply to how I'm leading, how I'm showing up, how I'm engaging and interacting with others, and knowing as a manifestor your entire role. So when we talk about the type, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the type, I'm going to give you the strategy, which is how they use energy, how they respond to energy, what they need to, like, what's their yes and no, and then the authority around, where that yes comes from, so to speak. And I'm not going to go too deep into that. I just want to give you a kind of a high level so you understand the nuances there. So the manifestor, again, has that natural repelling energy, but it's also very bold. It's very like statement. It's very like, we're going to do this. Let's move forward. And their whole opportunity, their strategy is when those ideas, when those yeses hit, it is coming from a place for them to inform and initiate. When they take action and they don't inform and initiate, that's where a lot of that resistance and a lot of that energy gets really stuck, is because people feel like things are being done to them because there wasn't a space for that manifestor to communicate. They have a defined throat, and I'll get into that later. The manifestor is here to initiate action, to create. They are very much from a space they have things drop in, and oftentimes it's random. And they'll get these hits. These hits just drop. And their opportunity is with that hit based on their authority, which their authority could be emotional. It could be they need to ride out a wave of something. So if you're an emotional authority, it may be that, oh, this really lights me up. And now I got to wait because in 5 minutes from now, I'm going to be like, oh, I don't want to do that. And you need to get more to a neutral space where it's still lighting you up, but it's not feeling so explosive. I know I'm an emotional authority. So if a manifestor is emotional, they're going to have to ride that wave first. If they're a pure manifestor, man, when that hit comes and it's a yes, they need to inform and take action. And so there's different authorities that we have. If they're a splenic manifestor, then it would mean that they are hearing that little whisper of their intuition that says, yeah, this feels good. Yeah, this is safe. Yeah, let's do this. Like there's nuances. And when you understand that and you align yourself to how you make decisions, how you take an energy, it can be really powerful. So the first type is a manifestor, and they're here to inform and initiate. The second type is what I am, is a manifesting generator. So a manifesting generator acts like a generator, which I'll talk really is a generator, and has these manifesting qualities and energies as well. So what they need to do is a manifesting generator, they have the ability. So a generator, let me talk about a generator before I talk about the manifesting generator, because then you can see the manifestor and generator coming together. So if the manifestor is here to inform and initiate, the generator is here to respond. And so the generator, they're known as the workers. They're about 35% of the population. So you got about 8% being the manifestors. You've got about 35% of our population being generators. They are the people that like to do work. They like to drop into a space of mastery. They like to have that space where they can really get honed in and have a consistent way they use their energy. They have a defined sacral, which means they have a way that they can, when the yes is right, when they say yes to the right things, they're the people that you're like, holy crap, how come they can work so hard? How come they can keep going? Oh my God, right? Because a manifestor is going to need more rest than a generator. And a manifestor can put something out there that then gives the generator something to respond to. The response can also come from even within yourself, right? It can be a question that you ask the universe. It can be something that the universe is presenting that you're now feeling lit up about. And again, if the strategy for the generator is to respond, then we look at the authority to say, can my yes, no be in the now? Is it a sacral? Am I a sacral pure generator? Am I an emotional generator where I got to ride the wave? My splenic generator where I'm like, nope, it's all about my intuition. Is this safe? Is this right? Is this good? It could also be, some other form. If you're a generator, it's either going to be emotional or sacral, because you have that defined sacral. And so the emotional authority is usually the first one we look at. The sacral would be the second. So if you are a generator, you're either an emotional authority or you're a sacral authority. And so it's either a yes in the now, or it's a riding the wave before you know your yes. When you align to the right yes as a generator, man, you turn on the actual generator and can go really deep, do the mastery level work, and you can work and move something through start to completion, which is going to look very different than what the manifestor does. Now, the manifesting generator, which I am, is a little bit of an interesting cat, so to speak, that they are essentially a generator. So their first signature is to respond. Now, here's where it gets a little dicey sometimes for a manifesting generator. They also have the manifesting ability. And so they also need to inform and initiate. And a lot of times, if you've been around a manny gen, and then some of you can say that even about me, they move really, really, really effing fast. They tend to miss things. They make mistakes. That's part of their design. They are moving at a really fast pace. And when they say yes, they can go really deep, really hard, but they are not typically someone that wants to get into a really finite level of mastery. In fact, that actually would feel like death to them. They need to be in a lot of different things and bring them together. They're also someone that a lot of times can make connection between things that don't feel like they connect, but they're here to play. They're here to be in things that they can pivot. So sometimes Manny Gens will start things. Sometimes they will see it through. Sometimes they will be like, nope, all I needed to do was start it. They sort of do this dance between the generator and the manifester, and their signature is to respond and then inform and initiate. And sometimes, I know for me, I've gotten it stuck because I'll go from response to initiate and I forget to inform. And it could be something as simple as asking my mom, who's been living with me, I need her to realize this is what my day looks like. And so I need her to not be in my space during these times, right? Just asking for what I need can be the space to inform that changes the energy that can feel really like I'm a bull in a china shop versus, oh, people are really engaged and want to be in that environment and very supportive. And so those nuances matter. And like right now, I think I have about 45 tabs open that typically for a generator, that would feel like, whoa, that's so much. For me, now, if you're like, I have all those tabs open, it's probably because you have some other lines in your chart. Again, the story is much broader than any specific area. But as a Manny Gen, you're here to be multi-passionate, multi-potentialite. You're here to step in and out of different spaces and be okay with the pivot. You are like literally the king and queen of pivoting. And so while the energy is a yes, you're in it. When you are done and bored, you're complete, right? So allowing yourself that movement. Now look at the difference just in those three types right now. You've got a manifester who's here to inform and initiate and has a very bold, sometimes very repelling energy, can be very forceful, very strong. And they're here to communicate and manifest. They're here to put ideas into action. So again, not to say they don't work. They have a different way that they work. They tend to be in blasts and then need to be deep periods of rest. But a manifester is here to vision and put that vision into action. A generator is here to respond to life, to people, to ideas, to things that are in motion, and then respond from a place of either their emotional wave or their grounded gut in the now. That's a very clear yes or no. Generators, one of the best things you can do with the generator is ask them yes, no questions. Don't ask them what they think about something in a big old concept. Ask them yes or no. Do you want to go to dinner? Yes or no. Or this or that, right? Like Chinese or Italian. Because if you give them too big of a space to respond to, it will feel like this whole chaotic. Give them a more streamlined space. And when they have a clear yes, no response, it's really easy for them to tap into their signature and their authority, right? So that being said, then we get the manifesting generator, who's this really multi-potentialite, fast, kind of in and out. And to some people that don't get the Manny Gens, and this is one of the things I struggled with. So when I was talking about this at the beginning, the thing I struggled with most was I never felt like I fit in a box. I would get reprimanded when I would start a hobby and then be bored with it. Or I would want to change up a routine, or I would ask the question, why this doesn't make sense. And everybody's like, because it just is. And I'm like, that's not an answer, right? And because I see things differently and I move at the speed of light, I also change my mind. And it's not that I'm crazy and scattered and disorganized. It's literally how my energy moves and how I bring in these different things and connect the dots. And so think about even raising your kids for a minute. Let's talk about this just for raising your kids. Imagine if you have a manifesting generator versus a manifestor as a child. And you're trying to put them in the same box to teach them the same way they need to do things, and wonder why one kid just resonates with you and the other kids, you're like, why am I struggling with this so much? And I love, because there's more and more teachers that are out there talking about how to use human design and grow in raising your kids. I do this to look at human design in terms of how you look at your team. So now imagine, because then the fourth type we have is what's known as a projector. Oh my God, a projector is a whole different. So the manifesting generators are again about another 35%, right? So you get about 70% of the population is some kind of generator. The workers, the ones that are here to have a lot of energy, lift people up, move things forward. You got about 8% of the population of these visionaries that have this really strong, bold energy to put shit into motion. Then you got the projectors, which is about, I don't know, about 20% of the population. Which is the space of, they are, if you were to think about the global project manager, they have a wisdom where they can see, they literally can see the forest for the trees. And they also have this really beautiful gift of being able to see potential and gifts, especially in the generators, to lift that up and build the pieces of the system. They're very system focused. And when I say system, I don't just mean our systems that we're living in right now. I mean like a global, universal, conscious level system. They are looking at the whole puzzle and how to rearrange the pieces and like activate and amplify the gifts and the talents of the players inside that space. Projectors is actually the next level of leadership that's coming, and it's really interesting. That being said, their strategy is to wait for the invitation or wait for the ability to be seen and appreciated. And so this can be really frustrating for a projector, because if someone like me is moving at the speed of light and I'm just doing shit and I'm not inviting a projector to share their thoughts with me, to share this insight that as a generator, I will never, ever, ever, ever see. That's the beauty of what a projector brings. They see things that the generators will never be able to see. And so if I'm not inviting them in, two things are happening. One, I can't see the forest for the trees, and oftentimes I miss the blind spots. The other thing is a projector has all this wisdom bubbling within them. Like this projector's like, I want to share my insights. And when they share without being invited, it creates this friction, because as a Manny Gen, one of the things that'll knock me out is anybody telling me what to do. If I did not ask, you will, like, there's an instant resistance that shows up. It's like, I didn't ask, F off. I don't want to hear it. And so there's this rub that happens when a projector starts to share with you their beautiful insights. However, if I would have just paused and asked, that energy feels really delicious in that case. It's really weird and really fascinating. I have several clients that are projectors, and I have, like, they're on teams where somebody's a Manny Gen, or just that dynamic alone. I have a client right now that's a manifesting generator. Her daughter's a projector. And just in changing the way she talks and invites her daughter in for her opinion has changed their entire relationship. That alone, that understanding of that different strategy and authority for the different types, and looking at, oh, I need to stop and inform and ask and invite in. Once they're invited in, she's like, oh my God, we're having such beautiful conversations. We're having this space. That's the beauty of understanding those nuances. So you can see the power of this in your teams. You can see the power of this in how you're looking at your family or your communities, or how you're raising your kids, right? And then the last piece is about 1 or 2% of the population. I know some of you are like, that math's not adding up. Depends on what you look at. It's just the collective kind of space of where we're at. The reflectors are these really unique unicorns, and they're only about 1 or 2% of the population. And they are here to truly just mirror back the health of any environment, the world. Oftentimes, reflectors who you will see, I know two reflectors in my life. And both have autoimmune diseases, both have things that show up in their body, both have, because they're mirroring the health of the world and they're mirroring the health of their environment at any given time. They are really powerful from a place of understanding how they view the world. And it's interesting because when they make decisions, they actually need to wait a period of like 28 days. They're connected to the lunar cycle. And so there's no power in the now. They really are here to reflect. And so when they're in a position to be, so think about it. I one of the reflectors I knew, I actually worked with in corporate, and I can totally understand why she was so worn out. Because again, a projector, a manifestor, they're not here to work like a generator. Yet we have a culture that says we're supposed to just grind, just supposed to work, just supposed to hustle. You're supposed to work 10 hours a day and not take a break or pee or do anything else, right? And what we don't realize is people are getting burnt out because they're completely taken out of their strategy and authority. And so I know this was a lot. I hope this kind of gives you sort of an overview around just understanding that there's 5 different types in human design. There's the manifestor, there's the manifesting generator, there's the projector and the reflector. Each one of them has a very unique strategy, and each one has a very unique way. And then there's a whole level of authority that some may have same authority, but it's a matter of where they're making decisions from. That when you can see just in that first layer of understanding your energetic blueprint, how those nuances can play and how they can really work well together, and where they can take people out, because we're not understanding what we're assuming is someone should be showing up exactly the way we are. And not one of us is here to do that. We are all here to show up differently. And so it's been really amazing, because I have to say, for someone who thought this was extremely woo-woo, I thought this was extremely like whatever, this wasn't a space I was going to play in. The fire lit and I follow the rabbit hole. And here I am 5 years later, and it has become such an integral part of the work I do with my with my one-on-one clients, with leadership teams, with organizations. Like, I don't take on a one-on-one client now without overlaying this piece. Because again, when we start to look at even the deeper maps, when you get into your sequences within the gene keys and other things that all get pulled out of your human design and your energetic blueprint, it's extremely fascinating to see how we can take ownership of our own design, how we can step into a space. And when we talk about our centers, we're going to talk about those natural innate superpowers, and we're going to talk about those shadows, which are here to keep teaching us layers upon layers of layers so that we can step further and further into the gifts. We're here to activate, teach, put into the world, share. And it's just so incredibly fascinating. And like I said, I don't take on a one-on-one client anymore without this being a piece we overlay into all of the strategic work we do. If people are going to talk about, this is what I want for my life, we need to connect the dots in terms of bringing their own unique energetic coding, understanding their type, understanding their profile, understanding the nuances around where and how energy moves throughout their chart. And so we take a much more holistic approach in that space. It's also something that I have done in a consistent way with any of the new organizations that I'm working with as well. We are looking at this at least on the leadership level, if not looking at it from a whole team dynamic and what does it mean. And so, I mean, I just did at the beginning of the year, I did a couple trainings where we did a piece around DISC, and then we did a piece around their human design and brought that together. Because what's interesting is you can actually map your DISC. You can map any of those assessments back in through your human design. And so it's really fascinating from that space. And so as we go through the next 2 days and I go into a deeper space around what else is possible, I will reiterate some of this again tomorrow. I also invite you to check out a container that I recently created, which is a way that I can take this work I'm doing on that one-on-one or organizational level and have brought it into a way that I can share it in mass capacity in a container so that I can offer this and make this more accessible to all of you. And so if this is something you're like, wow, I'd really like to see how this plays with me setting my goals for the year, me getting clear around what I really want, me understanding that there's a framework that I can put in place to make sure that I'm doing my part in the universe to take inspired action, to show up, to lead myself. And there's aspects of that. And like I said, I have a proprietary framework, my dream framework, that I work with my clients on to open access to that. And then what we do is we overlay the human design and the gene keys piece to look at those unique leadership lines, to look at those innate superpowers, to look at where those shadows, which aren't something you're ever going to get rid of, but those shadows are serving you to step through and contemplate layers to activate and awaken more and more of your gifts. And so your gifts being these really delicious spaces where you get to show up in discernment, you get to make choices, you get to teach and guide others from the things that you're experiencing and what you're here to do. It's all aligned with your greater purpose. And so there's all these tools and resources we do to get you clear. And then there's the space of who are you inside of that gets really juicy. And so I invite you to also check out the container that I've just created. It's called Dare to Awaken Your Dynamic Dream, and dream being that framework of understanding your key desire. Like, what is it you really want for your life? What do you want to embody? How do you want to show up? What matters to you and why? And there's a whole lot we do in just that. Then there's a prioritization that says, okay, if this is what it is, if this is the thing, then what are the ways that you need to show up and get prioritized, and how you're leading yourself, how you're putting things into action, how you're doing your part for the universe. And one of those things, those rocks, so the D is the desire, the R is the rock being the space of, these are the big containers, right? And one of them is about you. One of them is the space that says, I'm putting me first. And then there is this idea of, what are the essentials, either the essentials you need or the essentials you already have available to you. And this is where we start to introduce that overlay of the human design and the gene keys. Like, what already is innately inside? What are the essentials? How do we go deeper into some of the stuff I'm talking about? And then there's an approach which says, okay, so what is my strategy? What's my authority? What are the things I can be doing to align myself in such a way that I can create ease, effortlessness, joy, fulfillment, peace, as I'm manifesting and calling through what I say I really want, and I'm changing the trajectory of, what I want to bring forth for this year. And then we get into a space that we talk about the milestones, which is more around the accountability. Like, how are you going to hold yourself accountable to that? What does that look like in terms of being able to see your own progress moving forward? Because I think that's important, right? So there's this whole strategic frame, and then we go through a process that I call DARE, which is we design that, right? We design the map. We design the blueprint with taking this strategic plan and your energetic blueprint, and we design a unique way that is customized for you, that says, this is the design, this is the map that I need to keep me sort of in the space of congruency. It's think about it as a map and on or your GPS, right? It's your due north. So we design that recalibration point. Then we activate this space that says, where are my natural superpowers? Where are my hidden or unlocked gifts? How do I tap into that? And we start to connect those leadership lines. We start to connect those purpose lines, those manifesting markers within your coding. And then we look at, how do you radiate that? How do you actually communicate that? How do you put that out? There's real language. One of the things that's probably been most, probably the most amazing, like, aha or insight that's come through all the work I've done in human design, is there's an actual energetic coding, a language designed for each of us to be speaking our truth once we really understand our superpowers and understand those hidden gifts. And we can bring them through by the language within our own DNA. And it's so fascinating. So how do you radiate that? How do you actually bring people in to be in those containers with you? And then it's a matter of expansion, right? How do you continue to open up space to let the layers unfold, to let the map, because here's the thing, we don't actually, even when I talk about design, it's not even design from the way you think you design, it's letting the map unfold itself, and it's letting the map guide you. We don't need to know where our purpose is. We don't need to know where the map is taking us. We need to know where we ultimately, what matters to us, and then give the map the programming so that it can open up and guide us to where we want to go. And that's the expansion, right? It's the space of, how do you step into deeper layers of contemplation? How do you allow yourself a space to sit with and think about what that might mean in any moment of your time, and keep expanding on the journey as the path unfolds. So with that, I invite you to check out that container. We are actually going to kick that off. The container, the program itself starts February 22nd. We're going to have a kickoff call on the 20th. And it's a 7-week program that, while encouraged that you show up in the live container, because it's a way that you get to activate and actually create the dynamic energy of the space, there'll also be replays available. So if it's one of those that and I know for some of the work that I've done in this, for some of my coaches, I've been live where it felt really good to be part of who created the dynamic energy. And on the other sense, it felt good to be the person who got the replays, because I wanted to be able to slow myself down and really dig in and do the work. Either way, you have availability to do that however that feels congruent and right for you. So that being said, I will drop a link for that. It's also in the bio in my Instagram. You will see it's posted all over, but it is, you can go out and check out the Dare to Awaken Your Dynamic Dream. Otherwise, I will be going live again tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I will also be going live Friday, and we will get into more of understanding the profiles, the nuances inside of the 5 different types, and then a little bit about the centers. And again, I'm gonna give you a lot of information, but I'm also gonna keep it hopefully at a space where it whets your appetite and it gets you enough to start jumping down some rabbit holes without overwhelming you, because there's so And it's so awesome and it's so juicy. With that, I so appreciate all of you tuning in. I hope you make it a fantastic day, and I will catch up with you tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. And now I got to figure out how to turn all these off. Oh man, I'm upside down.